Welcome to St. Joseph, Missouri. This is my hometown. This is actually the basement where I did all my first game programming and whatnot. We've moved the couch. Basement's now mostly empty. But, while I'm in my hometown for the holiday, thought I'd make some videos from here. Let's just get right to it. Topic today has got to do with the fact that basically every middle schooler, at least in the United States, probably worldwide, can dissect a frog. Now, I'm grateful to say that in my path through school, we didn't have to. But how many of them could make a frog? It's a lot harder, right, to make a frog than to dissect one. So hard that, I promise you, no fifth grader can do it, right? Maybe no adults can do it. So maybe that's a high bar to set. But the reason I make this point today is that it's a whole lot easier to dissect media, to criticize, to have opinions about stuff, to have a reaction to something, than it is to make something. And I think sometimes we look at these things incorrectly as though they are steps in the process towards becoming a creator. And if it is, it's like the very first fraction of step one, beyond which it really has to begin from the process of creating things, no matter what it is. Creating a book, creating music, creating art, creating games, creating a business, whatever it is. Creating anything is a vastly different process, a vastly different set of priorities, vastly different set of skills, knowledge, relevant connections, relevant practices, relevant ways of seeing the world than being a judge of it. Now, there's value in the world to having critics. I'm not objecting to people who are professionally, genuinely in the line of doing critical analysis of things. There's room, even just from a purely practical standpoint, of value in the market for if something costs X dollars, but someone else can be paid less than X dollars to help me decide whether or not to spend X dollars on that. Sure. And whether or not that's something that there's a generalized score on for mainstream audiences, whether or not it's a known niche critic for a known niche audience, those things are all good. And that's different what I'm talking about. This has to do with the idea that if we want to be engaged as creators, that it's somehow important for us to constantly be breaking down the artifacts around us. And there's some value, and again, we can gather some things from it. But generally, they're so far removed from the thing we're actually doing, from the practice, from the skill, from the circumstances that we can do. And we're so removed from the process that produced it, from the work before editing, from the challenges that were going on around the time surrounding the situation, from the biases, from the background, from the circumstances that birthed its creation, from the prior influences, conversations, failed projects that made possible the project that we're then looking at, from the investor pressures, from all the other things that happen that shape the media around us, where at the end of the day, it shaped the way it is because whoever was able to muster the resources to produce the thing, that's their say over the risks they want to take and the audience they want to deliver it to and the reactions that they are setting themselves up for. But that is not even, like I say, phase one, phase two, right? It's the difference between dissecting a frog and creating a frog. Now, obviously, again, overstated for sake of illustration, creating anything that's made by people is clearly a lower bar to make than creating a frog. There's a whole lot of things that we can do that anybody else can do, whether it's writing books, making music, the usual list. And I'll also say there's a sort of thing that in many ways has only gotten easier through improved access to technology, improved access to online courses, to authoring tools, to editing tools. The kind of video software you can get now for editing that's either free or super cheap, or for sound editing, or for, obviously for typing stories has been a low barrier to entry for a while now. The content creation, the content distribution means are astronomically ahead of where they ever used to be, and remind a little bit of how in a lot of things in college. I remember going when I was doing undergrad. This was not super long ago, but not super recent either. And I remember when I'd be given assignments, and I would just think like, I'm just shredding through this. Like the internet makes this pretty easy to figure out, and it's almost as though, before the internet, this would have been really hard because I'd have to actually go to the library and actually have to find books and actually have to dig deep to find answers to questions instead of like seconds of typing it in. And what I realized was that the difficulty level had not actually caught up to the means that were now afforded to us to make things easier. And one of my favorite classes that I had in my computer science curriculum as an undergrad was specifically a class that said, okay, well, because you have a computer at your advantage, let's ask you problems that it's actually going to involve using a computer to even begin to solve. That it's not enough to just reason through it, that we really have to test the capabilities of what can we pull off with a machine to answer these questions. I found that really interesting. I finally felt like it mattered, that they understood that, yes, we have technology as part of our ability to perform inquiry. But it's like so many other areas of our lives that used to require an entire Hollywood set, that used to require an entire film studio, used to require 300 people on staff, used to require 60 people at a studio for games, for otherwise. Now don't. And once again, the assignment hasn't caught up to it. You know, something I'm continually kind of surprised to not see more of. Like in the indie game sphere, we see a lot of this, where people have basically said, man, you know, 20, 30, 40 years ago, games were really, really low fidelity. At the time, they had to be because the hardware couldn't do anything. I'm talking really terrible processors on the Atari, on the NES, Super Nintendo, etc., arcade machines. And that at the time, they were limited by the hardware, by the capabilities, by limitations of technology. But, you know, today's part-time, small-time, hobbyist creators aren't in the same way. And so instead, who are limited by their time or resources, more so than the technology, can still kind of create to those old specifications to an extent in terms of matching the look, the feel, the aura of it. And I've actually been really surprised how much we haven't seen in analog yet in some other forms of media, whether it is like TV shows, for example. Like how much did we love and have affect our lives stories that were told with props were basically like some old Twilight Zone episodes were a brilliant idea, black and white photography, cheap sets, and the props, I mean, the monsters were literally like a spider on a stick, like a UFO dangling on a string. But because they told it well with authenticity, because they consistently delivered on that, I mean, again, actors, good actors, I'm sure, are hard to find and cost money. But I've always been surprised how much we still don't really see the equivalent of indie games in so many other kinds of media. But it feels like it's a matter of time that we're getting there. That the people who have the restless skill, the theater students who aren't satisfied with being just in stage plays, the people who want to try producing a kind of content for online video, which is not just this talking face to a camera. We've seen a couple little attempts, and they tend to kind of flame out and not last, but we also tend to see them when they try to invest so much in it, may as well be a TV show production, and then they're confused as to why that didn't work. I'll tell you, it's the same reason why you can't invest like it's trying to make a AAA modern day game and deliver on retro aesthetic like it's an indie project. Those two things don't play nice together. But anyway, kind of a bit of rambling tonight. Just wanted to reflect on, once again, dissecting a frog, not the same as making a frog. And the latter is a challenge. The latter is something not everybody does. Look to make your frog, whatever your frog might be. That's it for now. Thanks for always tuning in. Just got to send another video out earlier today to the getyourselftothings.com list. So I want to give a quick shout out to that. If you're on that list, check your email box for that. Sharing another strategy that's been helpful there. And if you're not too late to join before I send out a third tip, fourth email. Again, it's not like you're not retroactively getting this stuff. If you miss these, you're missing out. So get on the list if you'd like to be a part of this. Getyourselftothings.com stuff. That's it for the night. It's getting late out here. Have a good one, everybody. See you tomorrow. Bye for now.